we're here with Love Power Radio Show. Awesome job, Latriva Deneen. Here we go. Nice day. It's all good. It's all good.
You get a pass.
Thank you. I was like, so how many minutes am I in? None. That's cool too. So, wanted to say thank you to our guest Tameika Carter. Thank you to Miss Speed. You probably got to speak. We're gonna have an amazing show, ladies.
Absolutely.
So here we go. What are we looking at right now? We are in the middle. Not even in the middle. We're in the throes of election season.
Mm-hmm.
But we are what? 7 days? 5 days? Somewhere.
Well, we're about November 3rd, like 9 days.
9 days.
Yeah.
9 days. So we are under we're the single digits.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it is so like that's just kind of what's on my mind right now.
Yeah.
And everything about this season, like for the first time this is the first time I've ever felt like, okay, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so much on the line right now for so many different people for so many different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I've never felt like we were in such a powder keg sort of experience, like where America felt so under pressure that I don't know how it's going to look on the other side of this. So I'm anxious because you want people to be well. There's been so much loss. So many things that people have missed out on because of this time, and some of it due to the choices that our government made for us. And so at this point in time, I wanted to get Tameika into the space because we've talked a lot about the experience from the voter perspective, but we haven't had any candidates in the room. We haven't had anybody to talk about, what we should be aware of, like what we should be present for in this moment. Because I feel like we don't necessarily, I know that I haven't experienced a voting moment like this, right? So I'm thinking the ways that we've functioned before, you have a civil one side, you have a civil other side. You may not necessarily like the other side as much, but you also didn't have this fear that they were going to destroy things.
Yeah.
And so like this is the first time I'm in that position where I truly do understand what people said when it was, vote or die or vote your life. So as a candidate, how are you approaching, or how have you had to approach the idea of voting and election? Like how did your mindset have to shift from a voter and a citizen when it came to you, or what made you shift when it came to you deciding to run for public office?
Okay, so first I'm running to be the judge of the 400th District Court. This is a district court in Fort Bend County, and it handles criminal felony cases as well as a civil docket.
Okay.
So for me, I've always been involved locally with politics.
Okay.
And we hear a lot about our national politics, and there's always a lot of focus on our national elections, right? But our local elections are what impact you the most.
Right.
So I've always, when I got out of law school, I was in the Fort Worth area, then I moved back here when I got engaged to my husband. I immediately got involved with the Fort Bend County Democrat Party because I just know how important that is. And it goes back for me. It's like, this isn't new. I've always cared about local politics. So then just getting involved in that space, I'm just very aware of like the local elections. I've always been involved in our city council and trying to be aware of all that because that's what impacts us.
Absolutely.
And in my profession, I'm an attorney. So I, a lot of times as a prosecutor, but also as a defense attorney, being in the courts, I've seen what's wrong. I've seen it from both sides. Then taking it back to where I grew up, I saw how the criminal justice system wasn't fair to a lot of people who look like me. So I kind of always had a desire to work in this space and effectuate change in this arena. And so I went from working in it, so now I'm seeking to be a judge because there are some things that you can do as a judge that you can't necessarily do as a practicing attorney.
So when you talked about always having been interested in local politics. Does that come from, now home is California, correct?
Home is Oakland, California.
Oakland, California. So that comes from even being back home in California. How did you know, how young were you when you got involved with politics?
So okay, if you take it back to my youth, I was the class president, right? Okay. I was that girl. Okay. I was running for student council. It's just always been a part of me. I never played sports. Okay. I was not in dance and cheer. That was never my thing. I was the student council girl. Okay. So yeah, in Europe, you gotta be a student body president. So I've always had an interest in that. I always had an interest in debate and student government. Okay. And so some professors already told me law is your route. Okay. And so of course that's where I went. But so I've kind of always had an issue. And for me, it's helping people. It's a service. Okay. And then some people get into it for the wrong reasons, I think, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So some people want the title, the perceived power that comes with it. But for me, it's just always been just serving, just helping. And so from high school student council, it's what issues, where's our class trip going to be? Right. It started on a small scale there, because that's what's important. When you're in high school, where's our senior trip going to be? Are we having this dance? Right. I was that kid on those committees there. And so it just progressed through college and then into my profession. Okay. Mm-hmm. So because I never in school considered those places, student government in those places, as government. Like I never. So how did you get to see, like how did you recognize that this is the way that I can help people? This is the way that I can make a change. This is the way that I can use my voice. How did that come together? It was just very organic. Okay. I mean, when I got into, so let's talk about it with high school. Mm-hmm. That's when you really start getting to those elections. It was the things that you want to see change at your school, and your teachers, you have to be in this position. Oh, you want to be on the committee to plan the dance? Okay, these are the students that do that. Oh, you want to be on yearbook, or you want to help plan senior trip? I just wanted to be a part of planning things for the school, the activities. Okay. Right. So, and I think you kind of find your path. Agreed. I mean, some people may go into the arts, that you know, and so you just find your path. And for me, once I got into it, I enjoyed it. That makes sense. I'm okay with public speaking. Okay. And it's just something that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. Because I wanted to know, like, how does a young person recognize that skill early on? Like, how do I know that I want to be a judge? How do I even get into this sort of path? And it's like, when you're younger, if you're that planner, if you're that person that wants to. And you also have people that just breathe that into you. Because I didn't come in and say I want to be a lawyer. I had a teacher tell me, you should try debate. Okay, I get in debate. When you start talking about your career, you will be a great attorney. Okay. So it's really, that's why I believe young people need mentors. Yes. And they need positive people around them to kind of help breathe those positive affirmations into them. Because when you have a child that doesn't have someone telling them, you can be this, you can be that, maybe they don't see that for themselves. So even though I was raised in Oakland, even though I was raised in the inner city to a teen mom, daddy went to prison, I still had positive people around me who breathe those great messages into me. Like, you may be in Oakland, you may be on welfare, y'all may live in government housing, but if you do this, you can get out of this, and you can be this. And so I just didn't feel handcuffed by poverty. I was lucky to have a good grandmother, mother, and counselors. And people who actually cared about what they were saying to you, and they weren't just, this is what you're on track. Exactly. This is where you're from, so you can't rise above this. Your only way out if you can play sports. Nope, I'm not athletic. So there's another way to get out of here. Absolutely. So I was looking on your website because I wanted to make sure that our listeners really got to understand you professionally and the route you've taken that really sets you on as a person who is very capable of doing this judge role. And so you said you live in Fort Bend County right now, which is in Texas. And so how long have you lived in Fort Bend County? Since 2009. Okay. So I mean, I was in law school here in Houston. Okay. And then my job out of law school took me to the Dallas area. Okay. So I was living in Arlington, working in Tarrant County. Okay. And so that was first. And then once my husband finally decided to propose, he pulled it together. I moved back down here. And then I started working down here. So you went to Johnson C. Smith University. Yes. And Texas Southern at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. Yes. So both schools are HBCUs. Absolutely. And was that done with intention that you chose those HBCUs? And what made you choose Thurgood Marshall as your option? So I absolutely wanted to go to an HBCU. I was raised up on Different World and Cosby Show, and so and for me, I just wanted to be around a positive, the Black experience, and I had that growing up, but I still grew up and you saw a lot of poverty. I grew up in a high crime area, and I know that there's another side, and I didn't want to deal with race issues. Like I wanted to go to a university and I can just live and flourish and just find my path without also dealing with all the other elements that you may get in some other schools. And not knocking those schools, but for me, I just really wanted to be like immersed in my culture and learn more about me and
focus on school.
And just school and just be. Like I feel like at an HBCU, our students can just be, right? They're not dealing with a lot of those other things you have to deal with in some of those other, the white universities. And so for me, that was my path, very intentional. And then Thurgood Marshall, I just applied to a few different law schools and it was one of the ones I was admitted to. Houston's a major city. I wanted to be in a big city. And so it just led me here. And then I met my husband, so I stayed. I initially said I was going to go back to California. Yeah, and then I met him, and then I'm like, all right, well, let me change my plans. No, he's actually from Birmingham. So we met at Thurgood. So he's a lawyer too. So we both met at Thurgood, and so both decided to practice here. So we stayed.
So can you explain? I know that you worked for the district attorney in Tarrant County. You said
Tarrant County, Harris County here.
And Fort
Bend.
So what is the role of the district attorney? So I would like to know, what does the district attorney do, and then what does the assistant district attorney?
Okay, so your district attorney is your elected official, right? He's like for the police will be your police chief or your sheriff. He is the head person. He or she is the head person. So all charges come through that office. All criminal charges are handled by from Class B misdemeanor up to capital murder in your county by your county district attorney's office. And so that's what we do. We handle the criminal prosecution. So in my role, everyone who's under the elected, we're all assistant district attorneys. That's all our title. Now we have different titles once you're in the office. Like currently, I am the chief of the mental health division. So I am the supervisor for that division.
But you're still an ADA?
Yes, we're all assistant district attorneys because we all work under him. So my boss is Brian Middleton. Everything that we sign, it's under him because he's our elected. He's like the mayor, like he's the elected of our office. It's every one of his attorneys, we're all assistant district attorneys. And then we have titles.
Divisions.
Yes, and so then we handle, our office handles from the misdemeanors, and you have the younger lawyers that handle those, and then the more senior you get, you handle the more serious cases. So I've handled everything. I started in misdemeanor, handled those cases all the way up to murders and capital murders based on, I've been practicing now for 15 years. So I handle the more serious cases now.
So when and that is, you said with the mental health division. So these are the crimes that have some sort of mental health aspect. These are the ones that you would work.
Correct. So I handle my caseload. I have a specialized caseload. I deal with the defendants who come in with serious mental illnesses. My district attorney, Brian Middleton, has a focus on jail diversion for the mentally ill. We know that too many mentally ill defendants are treated in jail and held in jail longer. So we're trying to curb that. And so what we're doing is we're looking at our low risk mentally ill defendants and see if we can divert them from jail. We can put them in a program. How else can we treat this? Because we know that sometimes their behavior is a symptom of their mental illness. Now, of course, if they're a danger, they have to be committed. You're dangerous. But if they're not, and they're low risk, let's find another route for them. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to cut down the amount of mentally ill people just lingering in jail because they can't afford to bond out.
So your role is to decide, or what the program, what you're doing is trying to decide if there are people who their crime was maybe a result of their mental illness. And if their crime was, then you want to find other ways to treat them outside of the criminal justice system.
If there is a way. Sometimes you can't, but if there's a way, I get, that's just my case. So the attorney will say, hey, yes, sure, my guy's charged with aggravated assault, but he was off his meds. He was off his medication. We've got him stable on meds. Maybe we need to just put him in a treatment program, or maybe he's so severe he needs to be committed to a hospital. Let's do that. So we just take it case by case. And some they may have a mental illness, but they're also so dangerous that they really have to be locked away. Because you have, if they're dangerous, we don't want them going home. And we have those cases too, where I have cases where people have killed a parent, killed their spouse, or severely injured them.
And even if they get treatment, they're
still dangerous. Yes. So, we have to make sure that they're not going to be a danger. And if we can assess that, then we find other ways. We just don't want them sitting in jail. Most aren't.
Mm-hmm. Are there barriers that make it difficult for treatment outside of, when you have, so what are some of the things that make it difficult to not send somebody to jail, even though you've decided they're a nonviolent offender?
So the most difficult part, and it's not just Fort Bend County, Harris County, nationwide, we just don't put enough resources into mental illness. And so if you have someone who is usually poor, because if someone has financial means, good insurance, usually their parent, their family can get them help, right? Most of our population are the people who they're low income. Their family may not have insurance or they don't have the means. And so they're being treated when they're arrested. When they go off their meds, they're in jail, then they're getting treated. Then they're back on the street. And so that population is just not enough resources. In Fort Bend County, we don't have an inpatient mental health hospital. So it just makes it very difficult finding places. So I may have, say, if a defendant comes in and his attorney is like, okay, well, he's stable on his meds in the jail, but we don't have housing for him. And so you don't want to release to the street. And so we do have a discharge planner at the jail. They work with us, and we try to find, it's a really collaborative effort, this division that I'm in, not all divisions, this division that I'm in. And if you don't have housing, that's a whole nother barrier, because you don't want to release them to the street, because then they're going to be back arrested soon. So it's really, unfortunately, this country, like how we don't put enough funding into our schools. We don't put enough funding into mental illness. And if you're not lucky enough to be in a family with means, it's just a big hurdle.
So when it comes to those of us who are sick, like, how do we get the funding? Basically, how do we get? Because I don't want it to be. And
that's a very complex issue, because that would be like saying, how do we get enough funding for our schools? Well, it's our elected officials in Austin and in Washington D.C. That's where it's at. It's your representatives. It's your state representative, your state senators, and then also the U.S. representative and senator, and just getting funding. And it's definitely not just a Texas issue, although Texas ranks among the worst, with funding, lack of funding for schools, also like suffer mental illness. But that's a very complex issue.
And that's good to know, because a lot of times, like you said earlier, in terms of voting, right? A lot of energy is placed on those national races because that's what's publicized and that's what seems to be identified as the most important. However, the local elections are the places where the change and if our lives are going to be impacted, it's going to be about what happens there. And so we need to understand, your ADA can do up to this much. Like, this is what we are able to do, and this is where we have those gaps. Like, we would love to be able to serve and help this other this other demographic as they come out of jail or prison or whatever the term is. And this is where we don't have anything else, and this is where this elected official. So this is why it's important for us to know who comes after whom. So after, what did you say the ADA of Fort Bend County was?
The district attorney.
The district attorney.
Yeah, he's Brian Middleton.
Brian Middleton. So once Brian Middleton has done what he can do with regard to the resources, this is the next party that would give him what he needs. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times as voters, we don't necessarily know these links, right? Or how these people are connected, so that we can talk to who's next. Because, I know Brian Middleton now. I know that name, but I don't know who comes after that. And so then my arms are in the air, because I don't know who to really move into. You know what I'm saying?
I really think people, there's not enough attention paid to our local elected officials. That's just across the board. If you look at some of the local, just your city council, your school board, people generally with kids can't tell you who's on their school board, but they're making decisions for your kids every day. You go to a school board meeting and there are like no parents in the audience or just a few. And I'm like, seriously, you complain about the school? And I'm not blaming the people. I think there's just a lack of education. And I think it's by design.
I agree.
They don't want y'all down at the school
That's
board
right.
telling them what to do.
Right.
They don't want y'all down in Austin
Right.
really seeing what they're doing
Right.
and making those decisions, because then you may demand more from them.
Exactly.
And so they want to do what they want to do with the funds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, unless you're like really there and involved,
You won't know.
and they're going unchecked.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still learning. I learned about mud representative when
Absolutely.
I moved in Fort Bend County, and I didn't know how much power they had. I'm like, wait, what's a mud? And
Exactly.
what do they do?
Exactly.
Like, but they're getting tax money, and they're doing what they want, and we don't even.
Right.
Meetings be on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. and
Yeah,
you like at work, you don't know what's going on, you know.
Exactly.
And so it's really, you have to be really. I hope this election cycle, if nothing else, we have learned to be more intentional with figuring out what's going on around us. Who has our money? Who has our tax money? And what are they doing with it?
And and I'm grateful for where we live in Missouri City because it's small enough for you to be intimately involved, for you to know. Like, there's one young lady, the barbecue spot that is in my neighborhood that I frequent, child, had no clue. She giving me my food every week. One week she was like, "Oh, I'm Vashandra, and I'm running for this."
She's on Missouri City Council.
Yes. She's like, "I'm Vashandra, and I'm running for this." I was like, "Thank you, and thank you." And like in Missouri City, greatest barbecue. Like, I love it. The wonderful place, and super small, super mom, dad, baby, and I was like. Literally, it was like my third trip. And she was like, and I was like, okay. And so I love Missouri City because, and that's what I love it because I teach history. And so talking to my kids right now about government and, it's local and state and municipal, and this is where you can affect change. And I'm like, have y'all seen these posters? And they're now super excited to just be like, I saw Miss So-and-so.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, just get the name out.
Right.
I don't care who, just make sure you notice.
Yeah.
But we don't really know, and just as a teacher, like, I'm learning how powerful the school board is. I'm learning because much like parents, everything's the district, right? And so you don't realize that the district is a part of a system, and the school board is where these decisions are made. It's not the superintendent; he's a part of it in our situation.
Yeah.
But and so.
And they're elected.
They are. And it's like, you don't have to call me and yell at me as a teacher. You don't have to call the school and yell at the school because they're not doing what you want. Let's keep leveling it up and get to the place where you can go and say something and make a difference. And we, as Black people, we don't I don't know how. I remember our parents being very involved. I remember that generation, and maybe not our parents specifically, but I remember that generation just being very involved and very knowledgeable and very connected to the people who were running. Like, they would come to your church, and it wasn't just on the strength of, this is where I know that it's going to be a bunch of Black people. Most of those people in that audience had a relationship with whoever that person was that was running. And so we've changed. We've gotten sort of away from that as a community. And I'm interested in knowing how when you sit and you see this as a constituent, and then also as someone who is running for office, how would you recommend, or what do you say to people in order to motivate them to just get involved? Like, even if you don't vote, just get knowledgeable. And I don't want to say don't vote, but for some people, it's like, I'm not even on this train. But if nothing else, like, how do you encourage them to get knowledge if they're not going to vote?
I just always tell people there is something that you care about.
Okay.
There are very few people that will walk around here and they don't care about anything.
Okay.
There is something that you care about. If it is your health insurance, well, okay, you need to talk to your representative. Find out about that. Okay. If it's your kid's schooling, okay, let's get involved with the school board. If it's just things, your criminal justice reform that everyone's talking about, well, let's know, your city council, your mayor, they're over there handling your police chief. Right. Your sheriff is actually elected. So if you care, there is something that you care about. Find it. Just get involved in that one thing. Okay. You don't have to be involved with everything. Right. Mine was criminal justice reform. Okay. Just being young, just living in that community, coming from Oakland, criminal justice was always important to me. I also care about discrimination in the workplace, but for me, criminal justice was my number one. Okay. So I knew that was going to be what I was involved in. So I just say, whatever you care about, do that. I can't tell you anything about taxes, IRS. That's not my ministry. That's not my strength, So I don't try to be everywhere.
Yes.
I just really say these are the issues that are important to me.
Okay.
And I educate myself in that
That's
area
right.
and
That's so
start
good.
there. And just being in that area, I've met more people. Like
Yes.
I've met people that work for the hospital district. Like, oh, you're over the hospital district?
Sure.
You're an executive at Texas Children's Hospital?
Sure. Because
Just
that's
being
important
out.
to them
Yeah,
too.
exactly. And you
Yeah.
just connect and you just meet more people. Find an organization maybe that can help you with that. I just joined my local NAACP when I moved out there, and so just find an area that interests you and start there. Start small.
That's such good advice. We're going to continue our conversation with Tameika Carter in 1 second, right after this.
Are you tired of bad?
Perfect. That was good. I'm always like, how do we even start?
Oh, yeah.
That's good. That's good information.
From struggle to shine. Offering organic, cruelty-free hair care options, we focus on giving you multiple products to save time, money, and shelf space. Visit our website today at www.earthsnectar.com for thicker, stronger, healthier hair. And don't forget to mention
We have another commercial.
Which one?
Yeah.
Check out personality.
So we have this commercial, and then we'll come back from.
A true star
what's the
ready to
next commercial?
shine at your next
It's the
event.
Vitra D. Yes. Yes, that's you.
You're fired. I guess that's why I called you Carlos.
My bad. Stand by. My fault.
Personality or red carpet interview.
5 seconds.
Contact her at Latriva Deneen on Facebook and Instagram for booking information and pricing. And make sure to mention Stunner Radio sent you.
Awesome. And we are back with our guest, Tameika Carter. I keep wanting to call you your maiden name. I have to
Badger.
And so I wanted to know, you mentioned on your page, you said, if elected, I would continue working with the Fort Bend County Mental Health Court, and that I seek to break the cycle of recidivism for people with serious mental illnesses and focusing on establishing more community-based treatment solutions. So what were some of the examples of community-based treatment solutions that you would have, that you're interested in implementing that you haven't already done?
So as a judge, what's in your wheelhouse? You control, maybe, you can't dictate how every case is resolved,
Sure.
right? Most cases are in fact resolved through plea bargains.
Okay.
So there's that part of it. But when I have a defendant, if they appear before me and they are mentally ill, I make certain decisions about bond and bond conditions. So my goal is to work closely with our probation department, our mental health officers, and say, what are some community-based resources that we have so that they're out of the jail? And some of those, they have a lot of different programs because we don't have a hospital yet.
Sure.
And so I would just be identifying those community partners that want to work with that population and see if we can kind of connect those defendants with those people so that they're not just sitting and lingering in jail. And if they're placed on probation, I want to make it a condition of their probation that they have those kind of treatment options available, and also that they are not just sitting on a probation, just lingering. Like, what can we do to make sure that you're med compliant? Let's check on them more frequently and make sure that they are keeping up with their mental health treatment so that they're not getting rearrested.
Right.
And also, what kind of wraparound services can we give them? Housing, job training. What can we do to make sure that they are not back before us or getting arrested at Walmart for criminal trespass, for yelling at customers or something? Yeah, because they were not on their medication.
Right.
Yeah, so I want to do that. And I tie that into, I also want to do that with our youth offenders.
Okay.
I want to have a special caseload for young defendants who are, say, 17. So once you're 17 in Texas, you can be charged as an adult. So 17 to 25. So if they're placed on probation in my court, let's do the same kind. Let's do an assessment to see, do they have an untreated, undiagnosed mental health issue? A lot of times we see people who are raised with a lot of undiagnosed trauma, and we may not know. But if they were raised in certain environments, they may have seen things that impacted them, and we're dismissing it because they're walking around every day. But if they know people who have been killed, you know what I mean? If they know people who were drug addicts and used drugs in front of them or had drugs around them, that will impact that child. Yes, and it's not addressed enough, and it's really unfair. And then you see that person picking up a criminal case. Well, hell, he got 3 cousins that was shot. If he was 10, if you would address it then, maybe he wouldn't be here. So I want to do an assessment there to kind of see if there's any undiagnosed mental health issues, trauma there. Do they need educational services? As a prosecutor, I have access to we call it a jail mail. Every time you write a letter, it's read by somebody.
Right.
Prosecutors can get it.
Okay.
And so I've read a lot of jail mail.
Okay.
And there is absolutely a correlation between lack of education and criminal justice.
Absolutely.
I mean, you read some of that mail and you're like, this person is 19, 20 years old and they can't put a sentence together.
Right.
There is absolutely a correlation there. So if you're sitting on my probation, I want to give you some credit maybe for getting back in school. If you go back and just do some kind of training, then let's kind of credit your probation down. So you're not just sitting on probation doing nothing or just on the side of the road picking up trash. Like, what can we do to address why you were there? You can't save everyone. But if I have someone that really wants to change or they have the potential, let's give them the resources so that maybe they won't be back in my courtroom in 2 years on another case.
Or relationships with universities. So if you're between 17 and 25,
absolutely,
and I can give you some sort of discount at the local, university or company.
We have an HCC and Fort Bend also. I mean, just local business owners. If you guys want, if they will allow, some are willing if you ask. Can someone come in and intern in your, after they've been on and proven that there's not a public safety issue? Are you willing to take this person a job training? It's just with the school district, also with these young people, I mean, is there a program that we can get them in? They don't necessarily have to be in a bachelor's program, but if they're training to be in this whatever, it's just a skill. Yes. And really, these degrees, Lord, sometimes not worth the paper they're written on.
And I'm telling you,
you're gonna get a skill, and you can make more money than somebody with a bachelor's as soon as you walk out. And so if we can get them doing that, let's get back to that. When I was in high school, they were phasing that out. I went to Oakland Technical High. We used to have programs like that in our high school. We had auto shop. That stuff was been slowly taken out of our schools.
That they need.
And you're not putting anything in. So you've taken out our counselors. You've taken out our programs.
Arts.
The arts are gone. You're not funding that. Parks and Rec are gone from these cities. But you just throw some police officers in school,
and that's to solve all of
That's it. Yeah.
And it's like those programs. Woodshop was in place for a reason.
For a reason.
Cosmetology was one of the classes for a reason.
Cosmetology. One of our high schools had cosmetology. I mean, having the
electrical thing.
We had just even teaching things like the home ec. I'm just the basic life skills. They've taken out of these schools, and these kids are not being given the tools
to do it, do anything. And I think you're right, because home ec, you could become a seamstress, and that's how, even if you don't go to school, you're able to support yourself, especially from the Black community perspective. So all
that's just been taken out. It's just been taken out. So it's so like interesting. I just have all these little. It's just more we can do. It's just there are things we have got to get back to the basics and just think outside of the box.
That's right.
And sometimes these defendants would say they're charged with a crime. They plead probation. They're sitting right back into their environment. Giving some community service, may have to go clean up the side of the road, and that's it. That's a wrap. You think you're going to change something if you don't give them some tools? They're not given any tools to make changes.
Because the things that got them there are still there.
And they're going right back.
Right back
to the environment, the same things that got them in trouble. And you talking about, he picked up a new case in 2 years.
Yeah.
You give them any tools to make any changes, and sometimes they need that.
Yeah.
And everyone's not blessed to have good parents at home.
Or family. Because at the point that you get a certain age, everybody's like, you grown. You figure it out.
Listen.
But it's like, I haven't anything up until
18 and 19-year-old don't mean grown.
Not at all.
Like, you're legally there, but your mind may not be there. And if you were never trained, you don't even know where to go. I've had conversations. When I did defense work for a few years, I talked to some 20 and 21 and 23-year-old adults, men and women, and I'm like, shit, I mean, their maturity level is not there.
Right.
And you want them to go figure it out?
Right.
How?
Right. And do something different than what the reason they're even sitting here talking to me.
Right. It's just not, they don't know any other way.
So valid. And we'll have you come back, because we definitely, once you get this role, it's definitely okay. Moving forward, this is how we're going to keep this change ball rolling.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things that we've heard a great deal about for different reasons is voter suppression.
Sure.
And so it's something that, it's so hyped, and I'm going to say hyped, because we're hearing about it everywhere, especially from one particular direction. And so is voter suppression something that we actually need to be worried about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it looks different in different places.
Okay.
And so I'm in Fort Bend County.
Okay.
So it's going to look different than it does in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Now, on the first few days in Fort Bend, we had extremely long lines.
Yes, because we didn't vote that first.
Right.
Week.
And some other, you look around the states, there are places like in Georgia where they're waiting in line 8 and 9 hours. It was not that bad in Fort Bend.
No.
That's a form of voter suppression.
Okay.
People can't give that amount of time.
No.
Either they have to go to work or just physically they can't
do it. Right.
So if you have someone sitting in line for 8 to 10 hours and they walk away, I mean, it's a deterrent, right? People are going to see that. Like, I'm not going to send that line. Right. That is a form of voter suppression.
Okay.
I can say we have been pretty lucky in Fort Bend County because it got better.
It did.
And I'll give him much credit. My district attorney has his investigators driving around the county in anticipation of any issues. So there's not going to be people out there standing there with guns or doing anything threatening out there in Fort Bend because there's a task force that they're on call all day for any issues. They will respond to that polling location. We've been great. I've heard horror stories across the nation.
Sure.
So certainly it is absolutely a real issue.
Absolutely.
When you have your president calling people, telling them to go take up arms and watch the polls. I mean,
what do you expect?
What do you
Why
expect to
wouldn't
happen?
they show up?
Yeah. But luckily in Fort Bend, we've been pretty lucky. We haven't had any issues like that. And with that task force driving around, he did a press conference to let it be known that there are investigators driving around and they're law enforcement. They are to specifically to address those issues if they come up. And I think it's served as a deterrent.
That's
so far, we got a week left, but the first 2 weeks, we've been pretty smooth in Fort Bend County.
We went this morning because I was like, okay, let's get up at 6. It opens at 7. We'll probably, and literally they opened at 7. We were done by 7:15.
Yeah.
So the fact that, it driving up, it looked different. Right. And then when we got there, we were like second. So it just was so different. And I was grateful because, again, Fort Bend and Missouri City are so small.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to lose people's interest in these communities because that is difficult to get back. If you they're willing to come out and they're willing to put that effort in, especially now, you don't want to make it any harder than people already have to experience.
Yeah, and you look at a city like Harris County, who's already voted, they said 1 million ballots.
Right.
It's insanity. That's amazing. But it's because they have leadership. Who's promoting, making voting easier.
Yes.
Like, they're not trying to make it harder. They're trying to make it easier. And so that's what you need.
For people to do. And I think this morning somebody was like, here's a driver that they were just passed by and they were
Reliant.
Okay, yeah. So we're in Fort Bend, so ours is in Roseburg. So, yeah. So which, but I always tell people, like, if you go in person, go.
If you're
But for people who can't,
the ups and downs
they gotta do
other. You may have gotten a bit discouraged. Don't give up. Kimberly Michelle is your new go-to girlfriend for dating.
And I went to teach
Purchase your copy today.
You said about 10 seconds.
Available now on Amazon or visit her Facebook page, Dating in the Age of Narcissism. And be sure to leave a review and tell her Center Radio sent you.
And you are back with the Love Power Radio Show with Poet Goddess Fee, Latriva Deneen, and our special guest Tameika Carter. And so as we wrap our show today, we want to leave you with a love note. And so, ladies, these are basically what are words that you want to leave our listeners with today. So what is something that either is empowering or a reminder or a kind word? What is something you want to share with our listeners today? And Fee, we did not get to get your poem earlier. So I wanted to know if you have anything available for us today.
Most definitely. Because of the fact that even though you guys have probably heard this on the other show, you haven't heard it on this one. So with that being said, there's some beautiful queens in the building.
Yeah.
And I have to say this. You have been given this platform for a reason. So use it for the glory of his name and not for your personal adornment. You were sent here on an SOS mission from the Lord, saving souls across his land, guiding them back to him. As a reimbursement of your praise, letting them know that you too have been where they are. Once afraid to leave your trials and tribulations, now standing before you as a survivor. Look, you have been there. You was afraid to let go, but God reminded you that he is here for you whenever you are ready to come back home. See, you have a forgiving God. You have a loving God. You have a God that is worthy of all your praise. Now, they will get you wrong. They will forget that you are amazing, that you are powerful, that you are immaculate, that you have been given this platform. You have been sent here as a testimony of your faith, not just as a test. So let this be the story of how you live your life and drive into your success.
Awesome. Thank you. Let this be a reminder, she said. So Tameika, what do you have for the people today? Any gems that you want to drop? Anything that you just remind people of every time you see them? Just some sort of encouragement for our listeners. Anything?
I just always tell people to look forward, and your past is behind you, and it does not dictate your future. I didn't get into everything, but I tell you what, I've been through a lot and had to fight through a lot. But it just shows you, if you believe that you will have a better day and your future will be bright, you work towards it, nothing can stop you. It's just you focus on the positive and don't think you're handcuffed by your past. Your past is your past.
Thank you. Thank you. And that is so real, because there are so many times that the fear that we experience with moving forward is often linked to the things that have happened in our past. And if we just release that, then it allows you to move. It allows you to keep going.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. That's absolutely important. I want to make sure that you all know that everything that you have been through has created this experience that you are living in your life that has prepared you to do something amazing. And whatever you have experienced, you don't have to be tethered to your past, but you can absolutely use those experiences to share with someone else to help them come out. And so whatever you have that's going on, whatever you have experienced, please do not see that as a barrier to progress. Please do not see that as something that has counted you out of the game, because you are absolutely capable of being amazing and being great. And you have everything inside you right now that you need in order to make the changes in your life that you want to see. So we just encourage you to keep pushing. We encourage you to love on yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror, tell yourself you are awesome, and just give yourself the love that you want other people to give you, and start with that. So we want to appreciate you and just let you know that we are grateful for you. And this has been the Love Power Radio Show. Have an amazing week. Thank you to our guest, Tameika Carter, and for Miss Poet Goddess Fee for sitting in. Y'all have an amazing week, y'all.
Vote.
Vote. Vote.
Good job. Good job.
Yay.
That's awesome.
So me, Tameika, we need some pictures. That's okay. So we have our guests sign the wall.
Okay.
Engage in thought-provoking topics and presentations. This series will provide your guests with meaningful takeaways